What up, Tucson, Arizona? This is the Call Me Crazy Show, episode 104. And I'm going to be doing some little tidbits today. And thank you, first of all, to Public Access for letting me be on the Call Me Crazy Show. And I want to thank Marty, the editor of the Call Me Crazy Show. And I want to thank you, the viewers, for watching the Call Me Crazy Show. Okay, here we go, people. Okay, we all remember last December. Saddam Hussein got caught on December 13th. He got caught on December 13th. And I can't do this, dude. The dogs are barking too crazy. Look somewhere else. What up, Tucson, Arizona? This is the Call Me Crazy Show, episode 104. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to Public Access, to Marty, the editor, and to you, the viewers, who make the show possible. And this is my 104th episode. I can't believe it. I've been doing this for 6 years come March. And I'm just so happy to be doing it again. So here goes one of my first tidbits of the day for episode 104. We all remember back in December, on December 13th, 03, which was like almost a month and a half ago, we all remember the infamous picture of Saddam Hussein with the beard and the hair, and looking very, very, very wimpy. But anyways, the U.S. military reported on that day when Saddam Hussein crawled out of the spider hole. When he first crawled out, the U.S. military pulled him out. The soldiers pulled him out, and the first thing Saddam Hussein did was he spitted on a U.S. soldier. He put it in his face. Saddam Hussein spit, and the U.S. soldier was so pissed off. And God bless that U.S. soldier. He sucker punched and slugged Saddam Hussein down to the ground, and nobody said anything. And that was the first time in almost 2 decades that Saddam Hussein was punched or hit or any violence towards him that resulted in him getting hurt. That was the first time in 20-some years that Saddam Hussein got punched. And it still don't help the fact that Saddam Hussein was responsible for the 1988 chemical warfare that he did on the town in Iraq, killing all his inhabitants. I think it was like 3,000 or 4,000 people. But I remember seeing pictures. But it's good to know that Saddam Hussein is out of the picture, that he got caught by the U.S. military. But unfortunately, we still have the U.S. soldiers in Iraq. But it's now getting to a point where we passed the 500 mark, and God bless every U.S. Armed Forces member. But even though that we caught Saddam Hussein, the war in Iraq is not over due to the fact that President Bush is being, pardon my French, being a total dickhead in the White House, because basically it's like what I've been seeing ads for the Democratic nomination is that Bush is concerned with his own future other than ours. And to tell you the truth, people, back in 2000 I didn't like George Bush. And basically this year we're going to be doing Call Me Crazy 04 vote. So I'm going to be talking about voting, and I'll get into that later. But it's not who you vote for, people, it's who you vote against. So if you're over 18 and under the age of 65 or 68 or 79 or 104, please go vote, and please don't vote for George W. Bush, because 1, he's crooked, 2, he's a Bush, 3, he's crooked. So that's all I got to say about Bush. And basically, if George W. Bush had sons, his sons would not be in Iraq fighting on the front line against the insurgency in Iraq and Baghdad and Basra. If George W. Bush had sons, and he has twin daughters, if he had sons, they wouldn't be serving in the Iraqi war. George W. Bush in the late 60s didn't even participate in the Vietnam War. So that just goes to show that they're concerned more with the welfare of the rich and the wealthy than they are about the underclass, the poor, and the middle class. So here goes again, episode 104. We're going to be doing some urban sprawl stuff. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in a couple minutes. All right, people, like earlier I was saying, I was talking about George W. Bush. The emphasis on this year on Call Me Crazy is going to be the fact that we're going to be talking about the voting issues. Basically, who's going to be running the presidency next year. But first things first, I have to say that the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney, is a crooked mofo due to the fact that his former company, Halliburton, which is based in San Francisco, is making a lot of money in Iraq doing rebuilding, quote unquote, rebuilding of Iraq. Dick Cheney already had a couple heart attacks. It's too bad that he won't have another one because he's just as bad, if not even worse than George W. Bush, just because he's been around in Washington a lot longer than W. Bush has. So he's bound to have more techniques in swindling the poor. So here I go again, people. Don't vote for George W. Bush. Vote for whoever. Howard Dean, John Kerry, John Edwards. Vote for yourself. I don't care. Vote for me, people. Vote for me. Vote for Call Me Crazy for President of the United States. But I hope, my only prediction is that I hope during the election in November this year, I hope it's not going to be a fiasco like back in November 2000, back when Al Gore and George W. Bush were running for president. And we all remember what happened down in Florida. They had that fucking bullshit voting thing with the electric ballot fucking and basically it was I guess it was a rigged election. So screw that. Hopefully that won't happen again. And hopefully Dick Cheney will die of a heart attack before November, because that guy is really crooked, people. They know a lot of secrets. You also got to remember George W. Bush's father, who was the president from 1988 to 92. He was director of the CIA, and at one point, people, George Bush, the first president, said when he was CIA director that he said a nuclear war, this is back in 1980, he said this, 81, 82, a nuclear war is winnable. And this is the guy who ran our country 12 years ago. And he used to say back in the late 70s and early 80s, as a CIA director, that a nuclear war, if we were to instigate a nuclear war with any nation, that it will be winnable in our favor. What a fucking idiot. That's all I have to say about George W. Bush, the first fucking dickhead motherfucker. So I'm out of here. I'll see you guys in a little bit. Alrighty, people, here I am again about talking about Call Me Crazy 04, where I'm going to be talking about all the candidates for the Call Me Crazy show. And I forgot to mention earlier that Wesley Clark, the former commander who helped out and who helped run the invasion of Kosovo, well, not the invasion, but the liberation of Kosovo, and he made it possible for okay, technical difficulty there. But Wesley Clark is the one who was commander of the Kosovo Armed Forces back in '99, and he's running for president. And people, we all have to remember that we don't want George W. Bush back in the president's chair in the White House. So you either vote for Wesley Clark, which is kind of good. He's a good guy because he served, he was part of the military. So as far as I'm concerned, who's ever served in the military is good enough to be president of the United States. So Wesley Clark is a good guy, maybe. So vote for him. Don't vote for George W. Bush. Okay, now we're going to talk about Howard Dean. Howard Dean is a kind of a crazy man because this is what I heard and read, that Howard Dean is campaign is running out of money, and he's telling his campaign workers that if they can go, I guess, a couple paydays without no money, and this is the guy who wants to run our budget. So Howard Dean looks kind of crazy. He has that Joker, Jack Nicholson smile that I don't like. It seems to me that I think he will be worse than George W. Bush, only because he has that fucking shit-eating grin of his that seems to swallow up the whole room. So I'll show you a picture of Howard Dean in a little bit. Okay, next up is John Kerry. He served in the Vietnam War. He's also a part of the U.S. military, good enough to run for president. He says that he can change the whole country by helping out the normal people, what you call, I guess, the middle class people. And I know that every 4 years in every presidential election, they always have the same message: we're going to help the poor, we're going to cut taxes. We all remember George Bush in '88 at the Republican convention saying, read my lips, no more taxes. That's a fucking bunch of bullshit. There's always going to be taxes. There's always going to be two things certain in life out there, people in La La Land, is that you're going to be paying taxes for the rest of your life on everything from gasoline to your goddamn Twinkies to your zigzag paper to your alcohol to your freaking Staples, your freaking rubber bands. You're going to be paying taxes on everything other than food. And you're going to be paying taxes every year before April 15th, because that is certain. The other thing that is certain is death. We all know we're going to die, so that's the two things that we all know that is certain in our lifetime, that we'll be paying taxes and we'll be dead in however long it is. So therefore, you should go vote and vote for the right person who you think is going to be. But it's not who you vote for, it's who you vote against. And I'll be out of here in a little bit, but I'll see you in a little while. What up, Tucson, Arizona? This is the Call Me Crazy Show, episode 104, and I'm continuing the Call Me Crazy Show. I just want to be able to say that I just learned a couple things yesterday. And by the way, yesterday was Super Bowl Sunday. The Panthers lost to the New England Patriots. Patriots are the new world champion, second championship in 3 years. So it was an okay game. The first half really sucked, no score. But by the end of the third and fourth quarter, it got kind of interesting. But in the end, New England won. So it was an okay game. Okay, enough of that. I was reading a couple days ago, and I was looking up information that a couple weeks ago, Gaddafi, he's the prime minister of Libya. We all remember what happened back in '86 when Ronald Reagan sent that airstrike that ended up killing his infant daughter. But they were supposedly harboring terrorists that were connected to the some airport bombing, I think, in Italy at the Rome airport. But Gaddafi a couple weeks ago agreed to dismantle and get rid of unconventional weapons and dismantle the top secret program of making nuclear warhead that Libya had, because I guess Gaddafi is worried about what happened to Saddam Hussein. He saw what happened to Saddam Hussein, and Gaddafi doesn't want that, I guess. So he's trying to improve relations with the West and the U.S., of course, by dismantling the weapon program that they have, which I think is a good direction, because that means that little by little, hopefully the Middle East can be stabilized enough to a point where there'll be peace throughout the region. But as far as I know, there ain't going to be peace for another 20 years, because for example, we all know what's going on in the Middle East with Israel and Palestinian Liberation Organization, that they want to establish a Palestinian state by 2005, next year. But the Prime Minister of Israel, Sharon, has erected a huge, like 20-foot wall. I'll get back to you more on this. They're building a 20-foot wall. Basically, what they're saying, they're building the wall to keep out the suicide bombers from the Palestinian side to walk into Israel, blowing up the buses and whatnot. That's one of the many things that's plaguing the Middle East. But it's good to know that Gaddafi is dismantling the weapons program, and that should let the other Arab nation know that that he's working to, like I said earlier, to improve relations with the U.S. But we also got to remember too that Gaddafi is only one man. There might be some let's say, some bad characters in Libya. But all in all, I think the ending of 2003 was good in terms of capturing Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi dismantling the weapons program. On the subject of ministers and president, we all know who the president of North Korea is. North Korea is one of the three countries of the axis of evil that Bush coined a couple years ago. But his name is Kim. That's the name of the president of North Korea. And this guy's crazy, people. Like I said in an earlier episode, he tells his people that when he was born, birds began singing and rainbows started coming out of nowhere, basically telling the whole country that he's like the reincarnation of the chosen one, that he's a very spiritual person and whatnot. He's not, and he also stated that they do have a nuclear program and that it won't stop doing it. And so that's one of our biggest concerns right now. Not only the war in Afghanistan and terrorism, but also the war in Iraq against the insurgent. And now we're going to have to worry about North Korea, because who knows, in a couple of years they might be crazy enough to instigate anything crazy, because we also got to remember Japan, Taiwan, and China are also part of that area, and South Korea, and things have been very tense in that part of the world. So I just hope that maybe he gets assassinated, because he's a very bad person, because this guy is eating turkey and chicken and eating caviar and lobster while his fellow countrymen are starving by the thousands. Thousands of people have died in North Korea due to the fact that the President Kim will not establish any lines of communication with any of the provinces to set up food stations for any of the citizens. So for years now, people have been starving to death. There's inadequate medical care. Basically, the only people who North Korea cares about is the president's administration and all their henchmen. So I hope he gets murdered somewhere somehow, because he's a very bad man. He gets as bad as Saddam Hussein and Adolf Hitler. So I'll get back to you guys in a little while. But what else do I want to talk about? Yesterday also, during Super Bowl Sunday, Saturday night in Iraq, two suicide bombers, a couple minutes apart, on two different sides of town. I don't know where the town was, but they ended up killing themselves because they had bodies. They had bombs strapped to their bodies, and they ended up killing 60 people, including foreigners, which means they could be Japanese, Turkey citizen, could be U.S. Meaning any coalition member. It could be Spanish, it could be English or French or whatnot. But they killed 60 people. And now, back 10 years ago in 1991, there was no such thing as suicide bomber in Iraq. No such thing. Oh, it's been around for years. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. No, I take that back. It's been around for decades, put it that way. Suicide bomber, we all remember what happened in 9/11. But back in 1990 and 91, when Iraq took over Kuwait, there was no such thing as suicide bomber. But now, due to the fact that terrorism is so widespread, and it was able to hit to our home here in the U.S., it's now, let's see, I don't want to say normal activity in Iraq, but it's a commonplace now, suicide bombers. Also in Russia, 10, 15 years ago, it was unheard of having suicide bombers in Russia, let alone female suicide bombers in Russia. We all remember back in Russia when, I think it was a year and a half ago, when one of their opera theaters got held hostages by the rebels, and they ended up killing a couple of the hostages, and some of those rebels were women, so they were willing to fight for the cause. Basically, they don't want any enforcement of the administration, government of Russia onto their nation. So it's a very tricky thing, but things are screwed up all over. It's going to be a messed up Christmas again this year. I read in the paper yesterday morning that the U.S. military said that that the U.S. military will be in Iraq through the year 2006. I think that's a wrong estimate. Hopefully we should be able to pull out by next year, which I doubt. But I think we're going to be there for years. I hate to use this for an example, but a perfect example was Vietnam. 58,000 and some soldiers died for that war, an awful war that really nobody knew what was going on. So basically, now the U.S. Army and the Armed Forces, the administration is trying to give the Armed Forces soldiers and members an increase in their pay, or they'll want to give them a bonus for re-enlistment and whatnot. But I've been reading some articles too where I guess some soldiers are saying they can't pay me enough to be here again to do another tour in Iraq. And then I was reading this article in Time magazine, really good article, where all the soldiers are writing back home and not letting their loved ones know what are the real things that are going on in Iraq, the horrors that they see. One soldier here in the Time magazine that I'll show you later, he said all it is here is dirt and dead bodies everywhere. So God bless all those soldiers in Iraq, but screw George W. Bush. I hope he chokes on a pretzel again. I'm not saying that I'm insurgent. I have freedom of speech, but let's remember, people, it's not who you vote for, it's who you vote against. And another thing I want to talk about too is it was a year ago yesterday on Super Bowl Sunday. A year ago yesterday, the space shuttle Columbia blew up, and that was a year ago. It's sad to think that they passed away tragically. But on a good note, a year later, NASA was able to send 2 rovers to Mars, which is cool as hell, because you got to remember, Mars is 106 million miles away from Earth, and we have people here on Earth who are controlling those 2 robotic rovers up in Mars. And Mars, I don't know if you've seen the pictures. I'll have some pictures pretty soon, but they have some pictures of Mars that kick ass. They got some Mars mountains that look creepy as hell. They have some rocks that look creepy as hell. And both rovers, one his name is Spirit, and the other one his name is I forgot. But it's 2 of them, and they both been sending pictures. And this one picture they sent back that does showing a big old lava rock. It's creepy as hell. I like it. I wish there was some sort of sign of life up there on Mars. I wish it could be like the book, let's see, Arthur C. Clarke, 2001, when they show up on the moon and they find a big old black monolith. But we'll find out. But they're saying now that Mars is giving hints, the rovers are giving hints that Mars once had water. So we'll find out more about that. And you know what, I'll make that a topic for this month also. We'll talk about Mars and science fiction on top of that. Okay people, I gotta go, but I'll be back in a little bit. But I'll see you in a few.
There's no eye.
Look at that. This is our tax money at work. These people, whoever did these signs, are so goddamn stupid. They forgot to put the eye. It's good to know that our federal money and city county money is going for those kind of spelling errors. Alright people, this is the final segment of the Calm and Crazy show for now. Today is February 2nd. It's Groundhog Day. I never knew what it was about, but something about shadows and winter. I don't know. But we live in Arizona, so we're not going to be calling it Groundhog Day. We're going to be calling it Prairie Dog Day. So if you can scan this place and see if we can find a freaking prairie dog. This is the Calm and Crazy rover panoramic view of Tucson. Okay people, here we are again. Alrighty, we're going to be talking about President Bush had a State of the Union address 3.5 weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure. But he talked about domestic issues and foreign policy. And then he also talked about having people living or having man flight to Mars. I think he's like 30 years too late, because the way I see it, back in 1969 of June, when we landed on the moon, when Neil Armstrong said, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Since that moment, we should have been on a race against the clock to put people on Mars. Imagine if we would have started since the moment that Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. If we would have pumped in all this money and resources and research and put all these great intelligent scientists and geniuses, engineering, by now, 2004, we could have had maybe at least one manned space flight already in progress to Mars. Okay, now it's 2004. We haven't been to the moon since that time, and now they want to say, okay, we want to go to Mars now. Hey, we could have spent the past 30 years on the moon. By now, we could have probably had what I read a lot in science fiction novel. Is a freaking base on the moon. So it kind of irks me that George Bush is going to be considered the first one to talk about manned flight to Mars. That's fucking bullshit. As far as I'm concerned, when JFK said it, 1963, to put man on the moon, that was more credible. So all I'm saying is that we should have been on Mars by now. It's cool that NASA has the 2 rovers on Mars. It's kind of creepy to think that 106 million miles away, we are still in contact with Mars. My dream was for the rover was to find like an alien skeleton. Like, I wish the rover would land like in a alien graveyard, if you will. That would have been great. It would have been cool to see some, like, I don't know, some predator alien bullshit, corpses or whatever. But now we know that that President Bush wants to put people on Mars, and I hope he chokes again on a freaking pretzel. I gotta get out of here because I gotta go pick up my truck pretty soon. So I'll see you guys in a bit, man. Later. Hola people, this is the Call Me Crazy Show, episode 104, and this is my final segment for today. Okay, believe it or not, people, I'm over here on Speedway in a place called the Midway Plaza. We're in the back of the Midway Plaza, a bunch of restaurants, a bunch of engineering firms and whatnot. But believe it or not, people, back in the early 60s, where all these suites and offices are at, it used to be a drive-in theater. How do I know? Because of 2 reasons. Because me and the editor looked it up on the internet, courtesy of Marty, and we found a map containing the old drive-ins in Tucson. And apparently in the early 60s, this drive-in here used to be called the Midway Drive-In Theater. But now it's called the Midway Plaza because you can see there is no screen. And believe it or not, back in 1964, my favorite aunt and my father, when they were kids, they saw Hard Day's Night in 1964 here at the Midway Plaza, Midway Drive-In Theater. I think it closed, I guess, in the middle of the 70s. I'm not really sure. But how many screen was it?
I think it was just one.
I think it was one movie theater screen. But it used to be all dirt, and it used to be one huge movie drive-in screen. And they closed it down in the 70s. But I just thought I'd let you guys know that that's why it's called the Midway Plaza, because it's named after the Midway Drive-In Theater. But in 1964, the Beatles movie Hard Day's Night was playing, and my father came, which I think is cool as hell because I love the Beatles. So we'll take one more shot of all this fucking suites and offices. But back 40 years ago, people, 40 years ago, this all used to be a drive-in theater. That will be one of our showcases for Call Me Crazy Show. We're going to be visiting the remnants of old drive-in theaters here in Tucson. And next week, hopefully, we'll go to the one on Prince, maybe, or wherever, on Valencia. And at one point, there was, I think, 6 or 7 drive-in theaters in business here in town. But the Midway was one of the most popular ones because we all know Speedway is right next to it. Okay, I'm out of here. Call me crazy, episode 104. I'll be back in a couple minutes. We'll be talking about Mars, and I'll be talking more about the vote 2004. I'm sorry. I'm Call Me Crazy, and I'm out of here.